devil worshippers because of some of the graffiti around. They got on that bandwagon and everybody jumped on board, and it was hysteria. People wouldn't let their children out.
You jumped on that bandwagon too.
Oh, I led the bandwagon.
The final film of the trilogy shows more about the West Memphis Three, as new DNA evidence appears that show that they may have been innocent. This is the review of Paradise Lost 3 Purgatory. It has a Letterboxd score of 3.9 out of 5, which makes it ranked number 246 out of Letterboxd's top 250 documentaries. It has an IMDb of 8.0 out of 10, a Rotten Tomatoes of 100% fresh, and a Metacritic of 85, which has 4 reviews. As for accolades, it was nominated for an Oscar for Best Documentary Feature. Honestly, they should have called this Revelations, because the subtitle would have fit a lot better for the third one. But I also think, at this point, the second one should have never been made in the first place, because it was just so pointless in the end. But the third one, I believe, is just as good as the first one. I think it's an excellent way to end the entire series. They tie up loose ends as much as they can, and they provide more to the story and what might have happened and what the plausible theories are in a more responsible way in this movie. I think the mistakes that they made in the second one were resolved to a certain extent. And then there's enough substance to the story itself that would warrant another movie. I think what really affected me the most in this one is it showing just how everyone has changed from the beginning to where they are at this point, which I think was 2009, 2010. Especially Mark Byers. I was upset how he was portrayed in the second one, because to me it felt like somebody who was just going through a really bad spell. He did bad things, don't get me wrong, but it was clear to me that that was somebody who was going through a lot of hard things. And for the film to just portray him as this possible villain while showing him acting out was incredibly irresponsible in my eyes. But in this film, they really showed a redemption arc for him that honestly shouldn't have been necessary in the first place, because it was really unfair how he was treated. But I do like how they showed him how he is now. And then seeing the West Memphis Three and how they are interacting and how they are feeling, what they're going through, and then what the defense is doing as well, was also very well done. Like, this film does a very good job of structuring the story and going from where they started to the end in a much more concise, much more satisfying way. And if you know the story of what happened at the end, it's a bittersweet but emotional ending. I teared up a little at the end of the film. And I gotta be honest, it's not a satisfying ending, really. But it's not because of what the filmmakers did, but it's because of exactly what happens. And if you don't know what happens, I mean, it's gonna get spoiled in the Letterboxd reviews, so I might as well say it. They basically had a cop to an Alfred plea, which is a plea of guilty while maintaining that you are innocent. And it's a scummy way to get out of jail, because what this does is that they plead guilty while maintaining their innocence, but they then can't sue the government later. And it's just incredibly unsatisfying in a way, but also it's very emotional because they get out. That's why it's so bittersweet. But man, overall, great movie. This really should have been the second movie. There should have only been 2 movies in this entire series, and this would have been a perfect way to cap off the first movie. Honestly, it negates the second one in a big way, almost to the point where I would say the second movie is completely unnecessary. So I would definitely say, if you're gonna watch this series of films, watch the first one and watch the third one. Skip the second one entirely. Now, in every episode of Watch Rate Heart, I not only give you my opinion of the film I'm watching, but I also give you the opinions of the Letterboxd community. This first review is from Off the Cuff Reviews. Off the Cuff gives it 4 stars out of 5 with a heart, and Off the Cuff says, "It's a really shitty thing that happened to all these people." Yes, absolutely. Everybody was treated so badly in this. I have a few thoughts. These documentaries feel like a satire almost due to the families they followed around and the idiot police. This is a huge injustice, and it's obvious who did it, and it sucks that they had to plead guilty to this crime they did not commit, but it was what would get them out and off of death row. This was just insane all around. Off the Cuff really isn't doing a review of the movie, and I kind of understand why. That was like my exact feeling of the end of the film too. Is like, this is so unfair. They had to plead guilty to something that they did not do just to get out of jail, and it was mainly because the state did not want to get sued. That's basically it, really. Or they just did not want to spend more on doing another prosecution, which would have cost the taxpayers money and this and that, which they would have obviously lost. I kind of understand why they took the plea, but man, that is so unsatisfying. So this next one is from Raphael, Mr. Movie, Joe Vine. Mr. Movie gives it 4 stars out of 5 with a heart. And Mr. Movie says, "Oh, Mark, I really hope someone watched this documentary and gave you the right meds for you, buddy. The quote-unquote last installment of the West Memphis Three docuseries. almost 11 years and after its release. The whole thing comes to a close in a twisty finale that basically turns everything we've learned and know over heels. So it serves as both a closure, but also we go back to square one, leaving us with the bittersweet notion that the killers of these 3 kids are still out there. Don't want to sound like a broken record, but basically my nitpicks are still the same in terms of the way that the film was structured and all. Though credit where credit is due, they tried some new things with new footages, switching back and forth between modern interviews as well as old stuff. All in all, I wouldn't call it the greatest documentary feature ever to be put into the film, but it's certainly one of the greatest when it comes to capturing an era. I do agree that this is probably not the last West Memphis 3 doc in the series. They're probably going to do another one, it just showing what's going on with the 3 guys after they got out. I could see that happening. But I honestly do agree that it's bittersweet, not just because they took the Alfred plea, but also it looks like this is never going to get solved. And that really sucks for the victims' families. That really does. So this next review is from Persian. Persian gives it 3 stars out of 5 with a heart, and Persian says, John Mark Byers' redemption arc. What's sad about this comment is that it's true, but it also shouldn't have been necessary. Because to me, and I mentioned this in my review of the second film, someone should have looked at all that Byers footage and said, this guy's just not mentally well. We're kind of taking advantage of him. Why are we doing this? But it really is nice to see someone who was that passionate and that sure and that full of disgust by these men turn around and go, no, actually, they didn't do this and I was wrong. That was big for me. That to me was like, wow. If you remember from the first 2 films how he talked about them and how much he hated them, and to see him go a full 180 after that, that really sent some emotions to me, and I thought that was great that they showed that at the very least. And finally, this last review is from Peter Labuza. Peter gives it 2 stars out of 5, and Peter says, only one I've seen. Really? You chose the third one first? Okay. And found it quite facetious at times, if not extremely self-congratulatory about itself. I will say that the second one was definitely that way, to me at least. Was shocked to learn that after Paradise Lost 2 had a whole different villain, who is seen here but just discussed as a little weird and angry. Oh, dude, you have no idea. Given the fact that the doc is so self-referential, you think maybe the filmmakers should say, whoops, but no time. I kind of agree with that, but I also think by showing him the way he is now, they were pretty fair to him in this one. But I do agree that the way they treat him in the second one was really bad. We're talking about John Mark Byers, of course. The film tries to have its cake and eat it too by saying they aren't indicting Hobbs, just trying to get the 3 free, but they dedicate at least 30 minutes of film to slowly painting up his villainy. To be fair with that, it's not like the filmmakers were actually saying that and constructing it like they were trying to do with Byers. They were showing people who were experts, and they were showing testimony that he did in a trial to show that that's a very real possibility. I do kind of agree with Peter a little bit. They're doing the same thing they did in the second one, but I think they're doing that with much more evidence behind him. I'm actually kind of okay with it. And if anything, now I want to watch them backwards to show how knowing less about one's documentary subject actually makes it a better documentary. You might be right on that one, actually. Also, should note, we skipped the epilogue, but that probably wouldn't help the great. You skipped the epilogue? You skipped them getting out? Really? I'll be honest. I've only stopped watching a film twice because I hate it so much. But even with that being said, you didn't like it so much, you didn't even finish the epilogue, and you gave it 2 stars? I get not liking it and not wanting to finish it. A lot of people, if they're not liking a movie, they stop it. I understand that. I'm not that way. That's how I'm wired. But even then, like, man, the epilogue is probably one of the best scenes in the entire series. That sucks, but oh well. What are you going to do? So in review, the third Paradise Lost is an excellent way to end the series. It does a great job showing how everyone has changed that was involved in the last 2 films, and it is highly effective doing so. And it has a bittersweet but emotional ending. I'm going to give Paradise Lost 3 Purgatory 4 stars out of 5 with a heart. Great movie. Excellent way to end the series. Honestly, it should have just been 1 and 3, and 2 should have never really been made at all, but oh well, what are you going to do on this one? Really liked this film. I was actually pretty emotional at the end with what happened with the West Memphis Three, and especially with Mark Byers. I was actually really surprised how emotional I was getting seeing that this guy had this kind of arc to him, that he went from just downright hating these boys, to then saying, no, actually, I was wrong. And you have to admit, it must have done a lot for him to say he was wrong. I mean, really, there's not much else to say about the film. If you've watched the first one, you should go right to the third one. It's great. So overall, 4 stars out of 5 for me for Paradise Lost 3 Purgatory. It is on HBO Max like the rest of them. And that is it for this episode of Watch, Rate, Heart. But before I go, let's discuss next week's episodes. Next week is going to be the beginning of June, which means school is almost out for summer. At least where I'm at, it might be already out wherever you are. And because of that, I'm watching films revolving around teenage life. I'm going to start with the comedy Easy A, the comedy drama Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl, the dark comedy Heathers, and the 1996 Richard Linklater film Suburbia. Check those out next week. If you like any of the reviewers I've highlighted in this episode, you can check the video description for a link to their Letterboxd profile. Be sure to give them a follow and let them know that Brad from Watch Rate Heart sent you. You can follow me at Letterboxd and X at Watch Rate Heart. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it and share with your friends. I'm Brad from Watch Rate Heart. Thank you for watching, and remember, we all watch and rate movies, but you give them the heart that makes them live forever.